Yep. Okay. I'm just going to quickly check with the chat. Hello to everyone who's watching the stream. Can someone tell me if they can hear me? Because we've had audio issues in the past, so I just want to make sure that there are none. Okay, so welcome everyone to the FPL Script. This is episode 22 of the 23-24 FPL season. I'm your co-host Sharon Freudist, also known as JD. I'm joined by a very special guest today, Elevenify. Unfortunately, Fran couldn't make it today, and we have had an upgrade. To quote Dr. FPL, not my words. So, welcome, Elevenify. How are you doing?
Hey everyone. Yeah, really good. Thanks. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for joining me today. So I'm just going to quickly check again with the chat. Yeah, okay. So sounds perfect. We are all good with the sound quality. So I'm just going to get right into the game week because we also have a lot of other stuff to discuss in terms of Elevenify's website, his data model, and so on and so forth. So let me quickly run through my game week, which was quite okay, I guess. Not the best, not the worst. So I had, for some people listening on the podcast, I had Dubravka in goal. I had Pinnock, Alexander Arnold, Pedro Porro, Gabriel in defense. I had Saka, Son, Salah. Captain, I had Watkins, Solanke, and Alvarez. On the bench, I had Eze and Livramento because Palmer was suspended, and obviously I had Areola's 10 points staring at me. So sorry, I managed to bench back-to-back 10 pointers in 2 weeks and also managed to get exactly 45 points 2 weeks in a row. So I guess there is some correlation with that. Let me quickly go to 11ify stream and then we can probably discuss what we are planning. So 11ify, do you want to run through your team quickly?
Yeah, I'll do a quick run through. Yeah, so very underwhelming week. I think my game week ranks sort of 6, 7 million, something like that. For people on the podcast, I had Edison in goal, because I'm that kind of sicko. And then 3 1-pointers in defence from Gabriel Colwell and Zinchenko. Captain Salah for 6, and then Saka and Richarlison in midfield, just a 2 and a 1. The single return from Son, and then the only other returns were Solanke and Alvarez up front. I benched Porro for his unbelievable 2 bonus after conceding 4. Um, but apart from that, nothing really of note. I mean, this is the second or third week of my wildcard. I wildcarded game week 17,
Hmm.
um, with 2 free transfers in like a real suboptimal weasel. That's what I did. So it's working quite well, but this is the first week that was, yeah, very, very underwhelming
Yeah,
despite
I should
high
just
expectations.
point out to the audience that the ranks that you're seeing on screen are from Game Week 18, and so I have had a rank rise of 1,000, and I'm just going to say 11 has had quite a fall. I'm not going to mention the amount, but he has had a little bit of a fall. But I'm sure he'll get back to his dizzying heights of what was your average rank till date? Is it 24K or something?
Yeah, so I've had 4 ranks: a 2K, a 1K, a 23K, and a 27K. So
Oh,
the
so it's
average is
even
like
better than that. Yeah,
16K.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna let me throw in a little
Oh, yeah.
humble brag, then I will.
Absolutely. Anyway, so those were our game weeks, and I'm very excited to talk about 11FI's initiative that he has taken to new heights this season. Very excited. I've always been a supporter of 11FI's Substack initiative. I was a part of his Substack initiative when it came to World Cup 2022. with the data model that we created together, and we kind of published player data and team strength data together. So I'm excited to talk through his Substack site today. So let me quickly get right to that. This is the famous screen that, or the famous image that people get to see very often from Elevenify. So I'm just going to let Elevenify talk through when or how frequently he updates the data model, where people can find this data, and other aspects of this particular screen.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Yeah, so just for reference for people watching or listening, the first link in the YouTube description will be directly to a page that has all of the data that I produce and that we'll talk about on this stream. So you can go and click on that and have a look. And I've taken the paywall off
Yep.
from it. So go and have a look, go and download the data while you have access to it. Um, Enjoy, let me know what you think. And it goes through iterations of, I really do listen to everything people say. So if you something you want to see, something you want to change, let me know and I'll change it. So yeah, so looking at the image on screen, this is the standard team strength graphic that I update after every single game week and I post out there. I'll just walk you through it for those that aren't familiar at a very high level. We've got attack strength, defense strength, and overall strength. The definitions of them are at the bottom, but what the numbers actually are presented in terms of goals scored and goals conceded. So the attack strength is goals scored, and the defense strength is goals conceded. So these are the predicted goals that the team would score or would concede, whether you're looking at attack or defense strength, in a match against an average Premier League opponent. So this isn't the same as what you would see if you sort by the underlines in FBref or something like that.
Mm.
This is my model data presented in an average format. So there's not always a team for reference of an average Premier League team, but at the moment, I think it's quite helpful that Brentford are around about that mark, both attack and defence. So you've got this kind of example that this is kind of what all of these teams would be expected to score and concede against Brentford, if you're looking for an actual reference point as to what that looks like in real life. And then the overall strength is essentially the attack strength and the defense strength combined. So another way of looking at overall strength would be the predicted goal difference in a match versus an average Premier League opponent. So this is just a way of presenting the strength in a way that you can understand in how it actually translates in a football match. I know some people prefer ELO rankings, and you have companies like Opta analysts
Mm.
have like super rankings and things like that, where they might give a team a rank out of 100. Or I know lots of other analytic
I think
people.
538 as well, right? 538 used to have also a ranking out of 100, which combined attack and defense data.
Yeah, so 538 had that, and 538 did also have an attack strength and
Yes.
defense
Yes.
strength number, which was the goals. But the issue with that was that that wasn't league bound or league contextual. So it was a bit hard to know really what those numbers necessarily meant. Whereas if the numbers are presented how I do here on the graphic, you at least know we're talking about
Mm.
uh, Premier League and how they translate. So those are what the numbers in white next to the badges mean, and then the red and green numbers are the change in that rating since the start of the season. So that's the change from their pre game week 1 ranking. So the only other thing I'll add here is to remember that this is mostly an on-field model looking at on-field performance, and it updates itself, after every game week. But it updates itself by updating its priors. So one real key thing with the model is that it's not necessarily always going to reflect what our current thinking might be. Sometimes it might need to catch up a little bit, or it might not have fully caught up. Um, And the other interesting thing is also when sometimes, sometimes you're just wrong on a team and it takes
Yeah.
time to get to that point. So for me, I think Aston Villa are probably quite a good example, where you can see on the graphic they've got a really big plus 15 in attack strength this
Hmm.
season. And that's and my suggestion would be that this is probably where you need to remember that what I'm saying is my model shows a plus no a plus point 15 in attack strength, but that doesn't mean that perhaps, quotation marks, objectively they've improved that much.
Hmm.
What I think this more likely means is my model has had them improving that much, and I also think I was too low on Aston Villa to begin with. So, it doesn't mean that their attack is necessarily flying as much as that as it is. With Aston Villa, for example, I think it's that I was wrong on them, and it's such a big number because it's trying to adjust. Whereas other teams, perhaps Everton, I think, they're plus 0.16, so a really similar number, but I think that is a more fair representation of actually what is happening, because I think I was pretty right with where I had Everton at the start of the season. So that's the other thing to consider when you're looking at these kind of things and these numbers.
That's an interesting point because I wanted to ask you while I was looking at all of the defense and attacking strengths where or adjustments that Fulham is plus 0.00. So it's almost exactly what you expected them to be at the start of the season. Is it a combination of the model perhaps being already higher than others, or maybe higher than what they had yet to post in terms of attacking data, and also them improving as a team?
So is that so? You're talking about Fulham specifically here?
Yes, exactly. So, because you mentioned that it could be, for example, for Villa, you said that it's more likely that it is a case of your model adjusting to what Villa already were as an attacking team. So, how could we interpret a team like Fulham? Because we've seen a real resurgence, or maybe not resurgence, but they've really started to produce attacking numbers in terms of real goals recently. So, how could we interpret the plus 0 0? Like basically, they've been the same since the start of the season.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, Fulham. It's funny you point out Fulham because Fulham are a really interesting one where compared to other modelers,
Hmm.
I was very high on Fulham
Hmm.
at the start of the season, and it's probably one of the teams in my model I've double checked my numbers on the most because of how far away I was from everyone else on them. Um,
Would Everton also
but
not be another? Because I think those two, which are right next to each other, are both examples of where your model was maybe a little left field compared to others, but also has been vindicated in a sense.
so yeah, they're slightly different cases. So Fulham was a pre-game week one difference. Before the season had even started, I saw my
Oh,
pre-game week
fair.
one numbers for Fulham and both in attack and defence. And just basically I had them a bit stronger than everyone else did. Oh, we're not talking about massive margins here,
Yeah.
but I did have them stronger than everyone else. Whereas Everton is more, I was picking up and tracking the improvements a lot quicker than other people, and seeing it a lot early on.
You and John
The
McKenzie.
pre
Yeah.
Yeah, me and John McKenzie were seeing that pretty early on.
Yeah.
But pre-game week one ranks for Everton were pretty much the same as everyone else. It was pretty similar.
Okay, fair enough. So, I think what we'll do is we also have the live website set up so people can see how to maybe use the data because there are a fair few interactive bits on the website itself. And as Elevenify pointed out, you can just go to the YouTube description of this stream, and the first link that you'll see will take you to the website that we will be showing you or the web page that we'll be showing you. And what we'll do is we can dovetail between this graphic and the actual website or the live demonstration and talk through some of the interesting insights that you've gained yourself. Because what I've noticed as a data modeler myself is because I try not to be biased before I run the numbers, I also get surprised every so often when I see the numbers or when I see the differences from, let's say, preseason expectations to this, because this is a midpoint in the season. We can call this like a half season change. So we can quickly go to the live bit. And so yes, so this is effectively the website that you'll see, and I've cropped it so that we can effectively show it to the viewers. So this is the free member section. This live team strength, live updating team goals, and live player goal involvement projections as well. So Elevenify is effectively branched out to player strength model as well, and we can talk about that as well because I think that's a pretty interesting part of the discourse. So do you want to point out maybe some cases that we can test on, let's say, the first graphic?
Yeah, sure. So the first graphic is just a simple bar chart for the three strengths that we saw on the graphic before, and they can be sorted by attack, defense strength, and overall strength. And what I find quite useful about visualizing something like this is particularly the right hand column of overall strength. Um, lets you really understand sort of what we're looking at in terms of average and in terms of scale, and and particularly how the team's strengths translate into them being um, a good or a bad team.
Mm,
So, for example, with Arsenal, there's certainly on my numbers a much better team this season, but we were all talking about in the first few game weeks this season about how Arsenal look a lot worse, and their attack is really not working. It's not very cohesive. The numbers are down, and that's certainly true.
mm,
But this is quite an interesting, nice reminder about there's different ways to make up a good team. And I was tweeting a lot yesterday that I'm quite enamored by this Arsenal side. I think they're really good. But the way that they've improved this season is just it's all in defence.
mm,
So
yes.
their attack has got worse, but it's been a trade off where the defense has gotten so much better that their overall strength has gone up this season. So they're definitely a better team. And the numbers like this help you contextualize that, and at least make me more confident that they're a better team. And they've just gone about it in quite a strange way.
Mm,
Particularly, it's a particularly strange way this season as well. Um, if because what people need to remember is that we are seeing more goals this season. Particularly, most of this is because of the extra time, and then there might be some other effects in there. But we are seeing extra goals in all games. So generally, you would expect a trend that all attack strengths go up and defense strengths go down. So particularly in that first graphic we looked at, that I post quite a lot with the red and the green numbers. People notice that the attack strength is just greens all across the board, as attack strengths are improving, and the defense strengths are reds across the board. And that's what that effect really is showing, is that teams are scoring more goals
mm,
and conceding more goals. So for Arsenal to have a plus 0.12 defense strength in a context where everyone is scoring more goals and everyone's defense should be getting worse is phenomenal in my opinion. Um, Even if it came at the cost of 0.07 attack strength. So that's what this first visualization I find quite helpful, to just look at it and play with it like that, and look at the trends and the changes of how teams are. Because I mean, West Ham are another one who
yeah.
traditionally are um, renowned for being um, very strong defensively, and that's what we associate them with, that kind of solidity. But this season they've traded defense for attack, so they're another one that's overall rating has not actually moved that much. I would say they're a slightly worse team as a result of this, but
Yeah.
the manner in which they've changed is very clear. When you look at the actual graphic, um, I think some of these teams on the scatter plot, the next chart, we could have
Yeah.
a look at in depth, because then that will show you the actual change from the season when you click on them.
So this is one example. So I think this was recently introduced by you, right?
Yep. Oh yeah, I put this up this week.
Okay, great. So I have already talked to Elevenify off stream about this, but I guess because it's such an interesting discussion, I guess we can also talk about it on stream, which is the change in Newcastle's defensive strength. And because we've also seen a downturn in their actual defensive numbers, as they've had a plethora of injuries, and I guess players are also now coming back. One of the questions that I had was, is it a case? So, for example, they played their, I would say, the strongest back line that they started the season with, which is Trippier, Botmanshare, and Burn, last game. So, would you say that if they continue to play this, we should expect a more immediate change in their strength, but the model might take some time to catch up to that because it is not an instantaneous process.
Yeah, I think so. So taking Newcastle defense, both historically this season and going forward, is an interesting case. So they started the season on my model at 1.09, which was very, very high. That was the second best defense
Hmm.
in the league, actually. I was higher on them than other modelers and higher on them than the markets. So again, this could be another model effect that the defense drop looks so big. It might not be that it's that big in reality. It might just be that I was too high on them. But anyway, I was quite happy with my rating of them and 1.09, and that stayed fairly solid, that rating, until about game week 14. So I was happy with that number. It seemed about right. They fluctuated a little bit around then, but generally they stayed consistent. And then it's over the past 4 to 5 game weeks they've really tumbled down the rankings a lot,
Hmm.
as they've had some pretty poor performances defensively against some of the teams that are the weakest attackers in the league. So that's obviously going to tank your rating quite a lot. Um, it's a really good case of you we can present the numbers, you can have data at your disposal, but at a certain point you might have to work out what you actually think is the narrative you're going to spin on this. So at the start of the season, I think quite a lot of analysts and tactics writers were the cause and the effect of Newcastle's defence was that solidity. It wasn't necessarily that they had particularly strong personnel. People were saying that the reason they were so strong defensively was just playing the same back four over and over again,
Hmm.
consistently fit starting back four. And perhaps that's quite compelling that now they've started to tank in the rankings after that has no longer been the case.
Hmm.
Or they didn't have Champions League football to deal with. That's another one. Ultimately, it depends what you think is the reasoning for then how you think this is going to be going forward. So, for example, if you think the Champions League extra games was actually a big reason for this, then arguably you might think it would bounce back quite quickly. If you think that the arguments for the consistent back four were the reasons their defense was so strong, then as you said, you could possibly get ahead of other people and ahead of models like mine that won't necessarily update quick enough when that back four comes together again and people like Botman are back consistently starting. And you might argue that they'll go right back down, right, they'll bounce right back to their great rating. Um, for me, I'm a little bit skeptical
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
what's going on with them. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
big change that's happened in just a few weeks in the model. Um, I wouldn't be surprised to see a fairly quick bounce back. Um, they've been good for quite a long time. I think they will probably continue to be good, but they are definitely struggling at the moment. And I would probably, linking it to a fantasy perspective, I think it's quite an easy avoid right now until sort of people get back and we sort of work out what's going on.
Yeah, and I think when you spoke about the start of the season for Newcastle, the two things that I think got conflated were A, Newcastle had extremely bad fixtures to begin with, so their defensive ratings didn't really shine through, and B, maybe markets were a little more skeptical once, let's say, they had 2 or 3 bad performances because the fixtures were really bad. And as soon as the fixtures started getting good, we started to see them keep a string of clean sheets, which did not surprise me one bit because that is what good defense means. That as soon as you have favorable matchups, the odds of you keeping a clean sheet go up exponentially. So I guess we need to see, as you said. if the back four coming back is going to have an immediate effect, or whether there's a more serious underlying issue of the gameplay being different or something else that is affecting the team. For me, so when I model team strengths, I also advocate that I would prefer models to update slower than faster. Because if they update faster, I think there's more of a chance that you'll be led down the blind alley. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I update more on the slower side.
Yeah.
Certainly, a couple of other modelers have said to me that they think I update quite slow.
Hmm.
It's just preference, I think, really. The other thing on Newcastle here is no, and I'm talking about Newcastle specifically, is obviously a lot can happen in January.
Yes.
Because obviously we've talked about the defence a lot, but just taking one step forward, they've obviously been missing Tonali as well, so that will have an impact, and someone like Phillips could also have a positive effect.
Yeah. So before we move on to the later charts, I just wanted to get one thing, or your opinion on one thing, which is Bournemouth versus Fulham, because as you know, Fran and I have a bet on Bournemouth versus Fulham, and because Bournemouth won 3-0 against Fulham, I guess I have a leg up on that bet right now. Where do you see this going, as in terms of where they end up in team strengths?
In terms of team strengths, if I have to plant my flag, I would say that in terms of team strength ranking, I think Bournemouth will be ahead of Fulham by the end of the season, but it will be very close. In terms of overall ranking, they're still 0.09 ahead. Fulham are ahead, but Bournemouth have been really, really flying recently on both fronts, and it really seems to me like it's quite sustainable.
Yeah.
This has both been um, tactically, but also personnel. So Bournemouth were really struggling at the beginning of the season, and there was a worry Iraola might not get the time, but
Mm,
he was missing quite a lot of people, and I think also people that he had signed and he had wanted. So he had no Aarons, he had no Scott, and I don't think it's any coincidence that the people he wants have come back and then they
mm.
started doing well again. Um, they look like a really great sign. Obviously, Solanke's really thriving at the moment, so um, I think they'll continue to do great. Fulham's issue is really I just don't see how they can level up their attack anymore. Bournemouth, I think they've got a lot of scope for that 1.22 strength um, to get higher. I think it will continue to trend that way. Whereas Fulham, it's kind of the story of their season so far, as we saw on the Fulham chart. There's basically no change because they've just been what I expect, and I think they'll just continue to be what I expect.
Yeah, fair enough. And also, one thing that I noticed is two teams have been cut adrift by quite a bit, which is Sheffield United and Luton. So looks like it's going to be a race for who can finish like fourth from bottom, because the bottom two places almost seem to be destined for Sheffield United and Luton at the moment. So the next kind of graphic that we're looking at is projected goals, and this is over a 6 game week horizon. So I guess the key point here is, again, you can sort by each game week, and you can have a look at which team is expected to score more goals, similar to what review has, but for obviously player projections. So has anything stood out to you in these tables?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess one thing that's quite interesting about these tables is that we're going from a fixture difficulty perspective. We're actually going into a really nice period for all of the top teams. So, um, and particularly City. I mean, City always top this table. I think in the 6 game weeks that they had the blank, it was all but one game week. They still topped the projected goals, even though they were missing a fixture.
Wow.
So that's just how high I am on City, and this is even with the massive reduction we've seen in their overall strength is sort of like minus
Yeah,
zero point
and
0.12
this
or
is
something.
also
It's
without
really good.
Ferran Torres at Man City now.
Yeah, I mean, with Ferran Torres, this would they'd need their own chart because it just ruin the scale.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, there, so all of the all of the top teams are going into a really nice fixture run.
Hmm.
Um, so we're actually going to. They've gone through a bit of a mixed bag recently, but we're really going into a period where the fixtures are pretty nice for all of those teams going forward. So it's quite it's quite a funny projected goals chart at the moment where we just happen to be going into a fixture period where if you sort by the total like you have, it almost for the most part looks fairly similar to
Hmm.
what the table kind of looks like
Yes. Yeah.
for all intents and purposes. There's obviously a couple of things that don't, but yeah, Tottenham have some Tottenham have a really good period coming up. So obviously with the way that they play, there will be a lot of goals in those games. That's for sure. Both scored for them and conceded.
Absolutely. So I guess the projected clean sheets is a similar table, so we can probably move past that to the next bit, which is player goal involvement. And I am quickly going to go to this part and reiterate what Elevenify said, which is that currently, if you want to explore the rest of the web page, everything has been taken out of the restricted area, so you can enjoy all of the data and provide feedback to Elevenify about various aspects of the data itself. So if we go directly to player projected goals, uh, I noticed that this is quite a recent addition, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. So what is like what have you seen when you've run your model for player projections? Because it is quite a different exercise compared to team strengths.
Yeah, sure. So there's three tables I've got here, which is player projected goals, assists, and then just goals and assists combined.
Hmm.
Um, and all of this is built upon the team strength model. That's my team strength model. So that's probably the most interesting part of this exercise, and probably for other people, that would be one of the appeals of it. Is not just that it's my player level numbers, but it's all built upon my team strength numbers as well. When I've operated a player model in the past or done any kind of player projections, I've usually outsourced the team strength part of that to either 538 or We Rogues model or someone else's model that I think is much better than mine. So whereas now it's running off of my model. So um, I don't really like to say any of these things are better or worse than others. I'm always a big fan of like getting as many different data points and reference points as possible.
Hmm.
So what I think is quite nice about this now in its current format is if you are looking at this as another source, you know that it's kind of entirely independent now. So you can you can match it up against your other sources, whether that be your FPL review points or the FPL review raw data or the market data,
Yeah,
or
sorry,
even other
11.5.
projections.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but just to mention that Sartalp has created a utility that you can combine with FPL review and get a similar table to what 11ify has, which is projected goals, projected assists for every single week. So right now in the default version, you can only get expected points, but if you use Sartalp's utility, you can also get uh, expected goals and expected assists, and I can link the utility in the comments or in the description of this stream. Sorry, you can continue.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, so currently the tables are all sort of the top 60 players,
Yeah.
um, and it assumes a start and that they play the match. So I've taken any minutes part out of it because I
Hmm.
think particularly for um, whether people use it for fantasy or betting or whatever people use it for, ultimately, predicting minutes is the real sort of important
Yeah.
skill and personal preference part of it for anyone. So I think this is just cleaner that people can sort of compare apples for apples and oranges to oranges in this kind of way.
Sorry, is it assumed to start and also plays 90 minutes?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So so all three tables go across that kind of format.
Hmm.
So this is also updated. Everything on this page updates after every game week. Um, the player level stuff you'll find is generally a bit more consistent on a player level, because I don't think that um player level stuff fluctuates too much unless there's been like a really specific reason for it to fluctuate, like someone particular, like obviously Haaland isn't in the table now, and Alvarez is at the top, so obviously Alvarez's share of what's going on will be there, so like big stuff like that
Hmm.
will affect it, but generally the player level stuff is a bit more consistent. um but it's still all informed by the team stuff that changes every single week. So um, this will change every single week. So you've got a 6 game week horizon, but the game, for example, game week 21 numbers, you can look at what they are now, but they'll be different. They'll be different after game week 20, because it's all everything in this table is linked together.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So, so I'm just quickly going to try and explain how I use Elevenify site, which is primarily using team strengths and also the player projected goals ever since excuse me, ever since that stat has come about. So for team strengths, I think it's a handy secondary point of view to review, because obviously we use FPL reviews, expected points to run solves and get tangible suggestions. But also, what I like to do is maybe go to 11Fi's team strength model and have a look at the trends that his model is suggesting in terms of whether there's an uptick or there's a downturn in defensive or attacking ratings. Obviously, overall strength ratings don't matter too much in this context. I think it's more towards if you want to simulate an entire season, or if you want to simulate certain fixtures, that you can probably use that. But for FPL purposes, I think attack and defense strength is quite a handy metric, because as 11 if I told me off stream, the problem with elo ratings is that the context just gets taken away, because let's say if you rate it out of 100, it's quite difficult to understand where does a team stand or how can we interpret it, because I think interpretation is as important as application of the data itself. So in this case, for example, if I see, let's say, Newcastle going down in defensive ratings, that kind of, and also I think reviews expected point projections, also most of the times they match up with what 11Fi's model says, which is a handy kind of secondary source of information, and then I can make my decision based on that. So for FPL purposes, I think it is quite handy. My question to you, 11Fi, is do you use your data? Because the famous podcast by Simon and Virog, where they were talking about getting drunk on your own model, does that apply to you as well?
Yeah, so I don't think I use my numbers that much. I definitely look at them whenever I make any kind of decision, and obviously I produce them every single week. So I am, rather than being drunk in your model, I am constantly bathing in it. So it is obviously hard to um, get rid of your biases and stuff that way. Um, I think from any kind of fantasy related decision perspective, building on from what you said, I think probably the most helpful way to use the kind of data that I present on my page is when you've got these kind of um, I guess I would refer to them as like kind of low resolution decisions.
Hmm.
So it's a decision where you've got high error bars, you're not really sure what to do. Perhaps it's not very important, or you've got lots of conflicting sources. So um, the examples I will give. So for example, you could obviously use the player projected goals and assists and goal involvement uh, tables for captaincy decisions and scoring decisions, return decisions, anything like that. You can use that as another source and pair that against, market data, review data, top fan data, or what have
Hmm.
you.
Hmm.
So I certainly use it in those kind of situations. Um, and then for clean sheet and goal data, those are particularly useful when I find from a fancy perspective, I find kind of uh, those kind of resources particularly helpful when you're sort of trying to decide on maybe like a fifth choice midfielder or a fifth choice defender, or something like that, where it's sort of it's a transfer you don't really want to make, or you're on a wild card, and it's just a very low margin decision, but it would probably be one that sticks around in your team for a very long time. Um, I quite like using that because particularly when you start looking at projected points and solving and things like that, sometimes I think you can just get too deep into it and you can turn a sort of low resolution decision into a high resolution decision when I don't really think that's appropriate.
Yeah,
Sometimes for my fifth defender, I just want a 4.5 defender who plays 90 minutes, and I just want it for the strongest team defensively, and I want to make that decision very simply like that because I don't know what else is going to happen. I don't know how many different, so I don't know what solve tree I'm going to turn out to. Um, that's the kind of situation I like to look at team strength
yeah,
data
yeah,
data for in those kind of more like marginal decisions. Um, and also then just generally when you browse through the whole page and you look at things, I like to identify the kind of trends that I'm seeing. So, for example, on this page, we know that Man City, as I said, they always top this table, but they are really topping it at the moment. So, if you're kind of looking at this data regularly, what I've noticed over the past few weeks is now that the front page for protected goals and assists and goal involvement is just like massively populated by Man City players. And for example, people like Bowen, West Ham players, are falling out of it who would populate in the front of it. So you can identify trends quite easily in this
mm,
kind of way. Obviously, from expected points, you expected points you can do that as well. But I like the higher level approach that gives you and the context of like, right, that's because Man City are going into a really nice run, West Ham are going into like a poor run, etc.
yeah, exactly. So, on the clean sheet point, I completely agree with you. So, for example, there are a lot of decisions where I see that two defenders have almost the same expected points projected for, let's say, the next week. And so my decision really comes down to which team has the better clean sheet odds, because the only source I trust or trust the most to get me points as a defender for a defender is clean sheets at the end of the day. So I think the table like this is really useful in cases where I have to use it as a tiebreaker. And as you said, it's for a low resolution decision. It does help a lot because I've noticed that about a lot of data sources which don't give you expected points but give you expected data or some kind of peripheral data around expected points, or which directly affects expected points, which is that you can make game week to game week decisions more than probably you can make long term decisions. I guess that's another way of looking at this data.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely like again going down to whether it's fantasy or betting or whatever. The game
Yeah.
week to game week clean sheet stuff I find particularly helpful because you can really work out where the margins and the edges and particularly, as I said, particularly right now, I I'm very happy with where the team strength stuff is at the moment. I think is in the best place it's ever been, and it's um, a lot better than it has been in the past few seasons. So particularly on a clean sheet and goal perspective, I think it matches out pretty well. So
Hmm.
I'm quite confident in those numbers.
Do you plan on maybe doing like an art or a chi-square analysis or something like that at the end of the season to check? Because I spoke with Simon and he said that it's really difficult for him to go back and analyze on a player level, but for a team strength level, do you find that it could be a useful exercise to maybe check on the season data as a whole?
Yeah, so I mean, the model um, results are all being tracked. So there'll be season long stats to come out.
Hmm.
And I mean, just to put it in perspective, last season, um, the model had sort of a season long MAE of zero point 0.9 to actual goals and 0.55 to XG, and a season long RMSE of 1.15 to actual goals and 0.75 to XG. So that's sort of comparable and just beats out what the 538 model did.
Hmm.
So model performance is being documented and tracked. You can read about this on Ian's blog. If you go to the Elevenify Substack and you click on the model FAQ page, there's a section that is how good is the model, and there's a link to all of this stuff and those numbers there. So it is being tracked, but as you said, it's on a team level. That's on a team level. It's really simple.
Hmm.
So obviously we don't have the 538 model to compare to. So I'm hoping this season I can compare it to the market expected goals.
Yes.
We'll see how we get on with that. But yeah, on a player level, it's just a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of processing power as well. It just seems extremely infeasible to go through that exercise. And also the RMSE values, I don't know if they mean much because of the sheer number of players that you have to evaluate, and it's just quite, I don't know. I know Review has done it, but for mere mortals like you and I just think it's quite a pipe dream, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm happy with just evaluating the team strength part of it, and I'll
Yeah,
leave the player numbers as they are.
fair. So before we end the stream, I just wanted to get your thoughts back to FPL and Gameweek 20 because Gameweek 20 is going to be a week where a lot of people have benching headaches. I don't have a lot of them because I have Eze and Pinnock as my first and second bench and Livramento as my third, who has already lost his place. So the reason I've come back to Elevenify's team is because he is contemplating bench boost game week 20. So do you want to quickly talk us through your plans and if you're going to go through with it?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good point. I've noticed quite a few people talking on Twitter about benching headaches and they should consider bench boosting it. And it was only really I saw people say that, and then I checked my own team, and that's when I realised, oh, actually, yeah, maybe I should consider bench boosting my team as well. So from my team, um, if I was to bench boost, I'd be bench boosting depending on how you want to slice up the EV or what you view as the players that should be benched. But I'll be Leno, Palmer, Colwell, Konsa,
Hmm.
or Gabriel Zinchenko at Fulham away. Um, my view on the bench boost is always from a sort of paradigm, like what paradigm do you view it through? I always like to view the bench boost not only as you're boosting the players on your bench and getting their points, but also as a tool to take the decision and the errors away from you.
Hmm.
So I always look at a bench boost as the whole team because we've got no true EV. We don't know. So as much as you want to slice it up and argue, oh, yeah, actually, you're only getting the points from this player, that player. The point is we don't know. You have to make a decision at some point who you play and who you don't. So the way I think about the bench boost every time I consider using it is looking holistically at all 15 players and thinking about it as a chip that allows me to play all 15, not as a chip that allows me to play my bench as well.
Hmm.
There's kind of a little bit of a semantic difference
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
and that is why it's particularly appealing this week. I think from an EV perspective, it's about what you would want from a bench boost. You're probably looking at about 13, 14 with most of the teams that I've seen. So the bottom line here, I think, for people that are considering it, if you've got a kind of team that looks like mine, or you've got a good team, you can bench boost with a clean conscience this season. I think that's the way I would sum it up. I don't think we're going to have massive doubles like we have had previously, so I think the bench boost chip is probably worth slightly less. So you can definitely do it with a clean conscience, and always go with your preference over sort of marginal EV values. And I think we're in a marginal case here. So if you're the kind of person that really hates the bench boost chip, you hate playing around it, you hate working out when to use it, combining it with wildcards, and you've got a good team, then that's a real marginal decision that you should go with your preference, in my opinion, and strongly lean towards bench boosting. You can do it with a clean conscience. Whether or not I'll do it, I'm not sure yet. Um, I'm leaning towards yes, but we've been here before, so I won't string anyone along.
Yeah. I mean, I have the right. I mean, I have been complaining about it quite a bit, but obviously, the season has been good to me. So I guess I've kind of tried to forget about it, but also I don't want it to happen to other people. So hopefully, if you do bench boost, it doesn't go as horribly as it did for me. Obviously, the bench boost itself wasn't bad. I think everything that followed the bench boost just was the worst because all the circumstances ended up with us having so many double game weeks and so many massive double game weeks that it just fell apart. But as you said, face value, it does seem like with the information that we have right now, we might not get, or we are most likely not going to get massive double game weeks later on in the season to use the bench boost. So it could be a case of you use it right now if you have 15 good players, and then you're free to wildcard in the later part of the season with a very cheap bench. The problem I think last season was that uh, those of us who had played bench boost didn't find the edge in getting a cheap bench because there were a lot of cheap players available, like McAllister and Mitoma. I think those two were, I think, primarily responsible for, and I think Estupinian as well because Estupinian was 4.5 last season. So players like that, I think, were responsible more for bench people that had bench boosted earlier in the season to not gaining anything from saving up the value by having a cheaper bench. So that is, I think, the one deterrent this season again for people to think about. But because price changes and player availability is such a volatile thing, I wouldn't count on all of that. So yeah, it is an interesting point. One more thing before we leave that just I thought about was wildcard 20 because this is the last week that you can wildcard. So even if you want to make, let's say, one or two changes, you should hit the wildcard button because you lose the wildcard after this week. Uh, have you seen any wildcard chats that you compared it to your wildcard in 17 and found, let's say, a little bit in hindsight, but also in foresight that the decision to wildcard in Game Week 17 was slightly better? Because what I've seen for wildcard 20 is you have to sacrifice uh, one or both of Son and Salah because they are transfers in Game Week 21 anyway. So, what do you think in terms of wildcard 17 versus wildcard 20?
Yeah, so I wildcarded in 17 with
Yeah.
two free transfers, so obviously very suboptimal, but I'm glad I did rather than hold until now.
Hmm.
I think if you wildcarded last week, that was also good.
Yeah.
I think now wildcard 20 is very awkward. I've seen a lot of people saying, "Oh my God, I can't imagine navigating this wildcard," and I agree. It's pretty difficult. Um, Certainly a good time if you've got a high appetite for risk. Then great time to
Yeah.
wildcard because you can drop. You can drop Salah, you can drop Son, you can go with Nkunku. You can make some really really interesting decisions. But yeah, I think it is quite difficult to navigate. There's a couple of things I think people need to work out. One is how do they want to navigate AFCON, and then obviously that affects your Salah and Son decisions. Two, what is your belief on Haaland? Um, it sounds to me like he's going to be out longer than we might think. Doesn't sound good. Everything that's coming out of there, he might not be back until 22, 23. It's impossible to know. So you might want to go without um, a concrete plan to get him in
Hmm.
immediately,
Hmm.
or you might, or if you think is that important, then you need to sort of keep that in reserve all the time. But then that's also really awkward. Um, but I think it's a fine week to wildcard, as you said. You've got to use it no matter what. But um, it's a little bit difficult, I think.
Yeah, I think the word you used was perfect, which is it's awkward. All the solves that I've seen, so I ran a few solves just academically from my team value perspective, because I think the one thing that Gameweek 20, while most of the Gameweek 20 wildcarders have sacrificed is a little bit of team value compared to people that already wildcarded. And I think 17 was really massive comparable to Gameweek 8, where there was so many price rises and price drops that you could really take advantage of the price volatility, which has been a little weird this season because it really was happening in Game Week 8 and Game Week 17, but not otherwise. So seems like the people really gravitated towards these 2 weeks as potential wildcard weeks. And I don't know, I mean, we don't know how the price change mechanism works exactly, but seems like someone at the FPL towers might have forgotten to toggle the ignore wildcarders, because seems like so many transfers were made by wildcarders and that has kind of impacted the price changes. I don't know. But other than that, I think we've covered everything this week in terms of Game Week 20, because there is also a quick turnaround once again. one thing that you spoke about, which is really interesting, is getting Holland back. And as you said, we don't know when he's going to be back. It might be much later than we anticipate right now. Would you suggest that, for example, when we transfer out Son and Salah in Game Week 21, or let's say Game Week 21 and Game Week 22, depending on your free transfer situation, would you advocate, let's say, keeping money in the bank so that the moment you know that he is back for sure, your immediate move can be just Alvarez to Holland?
Yeah, so I mean, my numbers have always been a lot more optimistic and high on Haaland this whole season than anyone else's.
Hmm.
That was also one of the reasons that I didn't sort of wildcard earlier and I didn't drop him. I stuck with him because my my projected points on him is higher than reviews. It's higher than everyone else's.
Hmm.
I'm very very high on him. I think he is that important.
Yeah.
So yeah, my that's my personal philosophy based on my numbers is you need to own him.
Yeah. Absolutely. So
Whatever it takes, you need to own him.
yeah, absolutely. So I think I'm going to go with a similar plan where I have money in the bank, where I can do one transfer from Alvarez to Holland, which is what even if let's say other players start coming back, as long as Holland is out, I think Alvarez should see great minutes. And this is a game of predicting X-Men. So if you think that Alvarez is going to keep getting good X-Men, I think he's just a no-brainer in terms of keeping in your team till Holland is back. And we also have a lot of opportunity to see Holland's injury progress because there are only 2 game weeks in January. So, are rather 2 deadlines in January. So, we'll really get to see if Holland plays in the FA Cup or if he plays in any of, let's say, any, or if he is on the bench for any of the games. So, we can really understand where he is in terms of coming back. And as soon as he comes back, my plan is to immediately get him, regardless of the fixture. So, I'm with Elevenify there. So, uh, I would really like to thank Elevenify for joining me today. It really has been a different kind of podcast. We tried to switch it up by talking about his team send model because it is of vital importance that we have multiple data sources to corroborate what we get from your immediate I guess your most trusted X points resources. So before we sign off, I'm just going to quickly go through the chat because there have been some people who have kindly joined us. So I'm going to say hello to Lars Priyansh, who is FPL critic and was OR massive data OR1 for the longest time. Luis Bonilla says start Gabriel or Virgil. So my first suggestion, as always, is to look at what FPL review tells you to do in terms of expected points. But based on what we've seen, I would start Gabriel uh, because he has more expected points than Virgil. The next question is by Luis as well, who says, who plays on the right when Salah leaves Diaz, Darwin, or Jota? Do you have any firm opinions on this, Elevenify?
No, it's a um, good question. I would suggest harassing James Owen on Twitter. He will have the best answer to that.
Yeah, fair enough. Emma's Hive Mind. So James Owen is part of Emma's Hive Mind for Liverpool. So I would definitely recommend just reaching out to him on Twitter or maybe just tweeting or replying to Emma's post about the Hive Mind predictions and go from there. So the next question is by Gamer Arena who says Suchek or Palmer. It's Palmer for me. Next question is by Tor Caliberg, who says, I'm on wildcard and I'm keeping Salah for cap and you can stop me. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can't stop you from doing anything, but you will have to use all your free transfers. And I guess that is what 11 if I was talking about. You can either keep spending your free transfers as soon as you wildcard to get rid of Son and the likes of Son and Salah, or you can take the risk and simply go without them and then have a concrete plan if Holland comes back for Burnley. Because I think that is the one uh, big thing that people are scared of, which is if Holland comes back for Burnley or even Newcastle. So my plan right now is not to bother about getting him back for Newcastle, but if he is back for Burnley, I will get him back for Burnley. So I guess free transfers will help in that case, and also for any doubles that fall in that time period. So yeah, those were the questions or interactions from the chat. So thank you everyone for joining us today. It was really fun talking to Elevenify. He is a great friend of mine, and I always enjoy talking to him. He has great insights about the game, about football itself, about FPL. So Always a nice chat. So thank you, Elevenify, for joining me today.
Yeah, been really great. Thank you for having me. Yeah, but feel free to check out the page, everyone. I'll leave it open and access available to all. And my DM's are always open for any kind of chat. So feel free to reach out to me if you want to talk about anything football related.